So I'd like to talk about two related marketing concepts that I think marketers misunderstand all the time. So I would club them as adoption slash defection latency. And in pretty simple terms, what it means is that there is a delay between our, there is a delay between change of behavior and when that change of behavior registers. And I hope I'm kind of describing it properly. So adoption latency basically means you do a lot, as marketers, we do a lot of good work and then we have no results whatsoever. And then maybe after 6 months of effort, suddenly there are a lot of subscribers or a lot of people that buy our product or a lot of people that understand what we do. And the same is true for defection. We say, well, we put, this marketing is, let's take down our marketing budget, and you notice that there's no effect in sales. You're like, oh, well, maybe marketing was kind of useless and irrelevant, and I was misattributing it. And then you keep the marketing low. You keep on, keep on underfunding your marketing channel, and then at the end of 6 months, you notice suddenly there's a huge defection. 30% of your customers have stopped buying from you. And so I wanted to talk about this because I've been thinking a lot about this, and there are three kind of related aspects of this that I want to discuss. One of them is something that has not bothered me, but something that I've been aware of for a very long time that neither my customers nor other marketers that I know of have been able to figure out. So here's the scenario. Most customers that I've worked with and most online businesses have a much higher conversion rate on their desktop than they have on their mobile devices. So if you have a website and you have a desktop version and a mobile version, it doesn't matter if the mobile version is responsive or not. If you look at your analytics data, you will find that your desktop conversion rates are going to be typically twice as high as your mobile conversion rates. And this has been going on for a long time. This is not a new phenomenon. This has been going on for at least 7-8 years. And human beings are creatures of narrative. So when we see a behavior, we try to build a story around it. And so the story that started forming 5 or 6 years ago was that online shoppers or people who are on their mobile devices are fundamentally in a different state of mind. And so therefore, it's unlikely that they would convert the same way. That became the narrative. And there were two kind of key aspects that emerge from this discussion. One is that people on their mobile devices are typically in motion, right? Because you're on the phone, so you're multitasking, you're at the park, or you're in the bus, or you're driving, or you're sitting in the office. And so their attention is much more fragmented. And that's one reason why they don't convert. And then the other justification was that the people who are on their mobile devices are typically in the research mode. They're not in the buying mindset, and that's why the conversion rates don't happen. That's why they're not buying, because what will happen is these people will go home or at some point will go to their desktop and complete the transaction there. So that became kind of like our justification, right? So actually the conversion rates are really higher. We don't register them because they don't get attributed to the mobile device, and cross device tracking is not possible. So that became the story. This is not necessarily true. I think the more obvious reason is the fact that when someone is buying on their mobile devices, psychologically, the idea of completing a transaction on the phone is a point of friction. And it's not a technology point of friction, it's an emotional point of friction. I know, I speak from experience. It's been a real problem for me to transact online. For some weird reason, I believe that entering my credit card on a phone network is unsafe, which makes no sense, of course. But I don't do it. And what's interesting about this is that shopping behavior has evolved a lot. So I do pretty much everything on my phone these days, except for that final frontier, which is buying with the credit card. And the reason I call this to be an adoption latency is because I believe that what's going to happen is, because if you look at a cohort, if you look at a younger cohort, if you look at people that are younger, skewed younger, you will find that if you segment out the data, you will find that they actually convert at a much higher rate on their mobile devices, because for them, they don't have that psychological barrier that the rest of us do who are used to transacting on the desktop. And so that tells me that there's going to be a shift, and I can already see it. I can already see a shift coming, yet a lot of marketers are not prepared for this. We're still thinking that transactions are going to happen on their desktop. And I think smart marketers who are seeing this and are prepared for it can really leverage this long-term trend. So this is something that I want to discuss. And I want to give you a couple other examples about like defection latency. So one of the classical examples is Kodak, right? So Kodak, when they, obviously they were in the print business, in the film industry, in the film business, they had cameras, they had physical devices. Many people don't know this, but they actually pioneered the use of digital photography. They invented it. But it was such a small part of their business, and of course there were other complexities for them. For example, they were cannibalizing their existing business. But the key point is that the story that they told themselves internally was that, look, people are still buying a crap ton of cameras, so clearly there's a lot of demand for it. And the reason why there was demand for it was because of inertia. Shoppers are used to, when you think about cameras, or when you think about capturing a moment, you think about a camera, and you think about a print-based, film-based camera, especially 15, 20 years ago. So even though consumers psychologically and intellectually were aware of the fact that the technology was changing and they wanted this change, their behavior was speaking a different language, which is of course the thing that Kodak was reading. And as a result, they kept on giving those wrong signals. And one fine day, 10, 15 years ago, they just stopped buying Kodak cameras, and Kodak just died overnight. And so this is a really kind of, interesting aspect of, and I've talked about both things now. We've talked about adoption latency and defection latency. All right. So there is another aspect of defection latency that marketers get completely wrong, which is email frequency. This is really interesting problem, right? So what happens is there's a company, they have a marketing manager, and the boss goes to the marketing manager and says, look, email is driving 20% of our sales. We want to drive more revenue through our email channel because these are existing customers, and it's easier for me to reconvert them than it is for me to acquire new customers. Fairly logical statement. So the marketing manager does what most people would do under that scenario. They would just increase their email frequency. So if they were sending emails once every 2 weeks, now suddenly they're sending emails once every 10 days. And guess what? They're seeing an increase in revenue. So they are now building a narrative in their head that says, you know what? My customers don't mind if we send them more emails. Boss comes back the next quarter, puts even more pressure and says, hey, I want to get even more revenue, because obviously the boss has now seen that there's upside potential. So they want even more revenue. So they send even more emails. This goes on quarter after quarter. They get to this I shouldn't say terrible, but they get to the stage now where they are sending emails every 2 days. And maybe it goes down to even every day. And they're still seeing a correlation between frequency and increased revenue. And when they talk to their customers, when they actually survey their customers are saying, hey, stop sending us emails. We're getting too many emails. But when they look at the behavior, they notice that the behavior still correlates with frequencies. They're like, well, maybe the customers pretend like they don't care about it, but they actually care about it. And then guess what happens? One day, the final straw on the camel's back, they have like 45% unsubscription rate. And now it's really hard for them to get any revenue because their sign-up rate base is so small. And now they're panicking. This is again a classical example of defection latency. So we've talked about 3 examples now, and the reason I want to share this with you is, as marketers, we have to hold the line when we know that we're doing something that is, when we need to be aware of these concepts so we can set up expectations internally. Otherwise, we're going to do things that in the short run seem like great ideas and are bad in the long run, or we'll not do things because something seems like a bad idea in the short run, even though we know in the long run it's the right thing to do. So be aware of adoption and defection latency, and make sure your marketing plan works around these aspects of shopper behavior.